Harold is one of my favorite characters in the Fallout series. He is a recurring character in Fallout 1, 2, and 3, and his story is incredibly tragic. You see, Harold is a ghoul, or is he? Even though he looks almost exactly like a ghoul, whether or not he is actually a ghoul has been a subject of debate among the fans and even the developers. I'll get back to this later. Let's start at the beginning. Harold was a kid when the bombs dropped. According to Chris Avalone's Fallout Bible, Harold was sheltered at Vault 29. Vault 29, like other vaults, was part of a series of social experiments, and the experiment in this particular vault was that only children and young teenagers were allowed inside, and parents were redirected to other vaults. Then, in the year 2090, the vault opens, and Harold, who at this point is still human, goes out into the wasteland to make his fortune as a caravan trader. And for a while, he was actually quite a successful trader, able to make a living off of it and survive. But in the unforgiving wasteland of Fallout, being a trader is no easy task. The caravan he led would lose a lot of good people to gangers, scavengers, and mutants, eventually growing tired of their nuisance and noticing that they come mostly from the northwest. Harold and a small group of people decided to eliminate the source of the mutants. This group was led by a doctor named Richard Gray, and Richard found the source of the mutants, the Mariposa military base. They managed to get pretty deep inside the base, but most of them were killed on the way. Eventually, only 4 of them were left: Harold, Richard Gray, Francine, and Mark. Francine was killed by one of the Robo-Brains guarding the facility. Mark was wounded and sent back to the surface, which left only Harold and Richard Gray. They made it to the central core, a room full of vats, and that's when a robot crane crashed into them, knocking Richard Gray down into one of those vats and possibly wounding Harold in the process. And by the way, after Richard Gray falls into the vats, he eventually becomes a mutant and starts calling himself the Master and becomes the main antagonist of Fallout 1. I digress. Harold then passes out from his wounds, and his next memory is of waking up in the wasteland, slowly turning into a ghoul-like mutant. It's unclear how he ended up in the wasteland after passing out 4 levels underground, and it's unlikely that Richard Gray brought him back to the surface, because in his audio diary, which he creates after crawling out of the vat, he literally says, "I don't know what happened to Harold." So how did Harold manage to escape from the Mariposa military base? Here's my theory. Remember Mark, the guy who was wounded and sent back to the surface? I think as he was going back to the surface, he stumbled upon a terminal, one which controls the Robo-Brains in the base. If you play Fallout 1, you can actually find this terminal if you go to the Mariposa military base. And upon stumbling on this terminal, he may have hacked it to make it so the Robo-Brains don't attack humans and only attack the mutants, which is something you can actually do in the game. And now, with the protection of the Robo-Brains, he probably went back down, found Harold, and dragged him all the way back up to the surface. And then I think Mark could have left Harold in the wasteland while he went to find some help. But that's just my theory. We don't actually know what happens to Mark after he's sent back up. In fact, we never hear from him again. In any case, eventually Harold is found by some traders, and they bring him to the Hub, which is a major trade center in Fallout 1. However, on his arrival to the Hub, he has completely been mutated due to his prolonged exposure to the FEV-filled vats, even though to the best of our knowledge he wasn't actually dipped in any of them. Simply being near them for too long seems to have caused this mutation. In any case, this horrifies his former partners and employees, and so they abandon him, leaving him homeless and penniless. Already, this is getting quite sad. But wait, there's much more. In the events of Fallout 2, you'll find Harold leading the town of Gecko. Gecko is a town full of ghouls which have settled near the Poseidon Oil atomic power plant. The reason being that since ghouls are mutated, they find comfort near radiation and aren't damaged by it. By the time Harold came into town, the plant was run very recklessly and dangerously, and so he took over to try and keep things under control. Once you talk to him, you'll notice that he has some kind of tree growing out of his head, whom he calls Bob, or sometimes Herbert. This tree is important because eventually Harold travels to Washington, D.C., where Fallout 3 takes place, and at some point he decided to sit down and get some rest, and that's when the tree rooted itself in the ground, which is why he looks like this when you meet him in Fallout 3. Now, a lot of people mistake Harold for a talking tree, but that isn't quite accurate. He himself is not a tree. He is stuck in a tree, inside Bob to be precise. precise. A cult known as the Tree Minders start worshipping him. When you talk to him, he'll ask you to kill him. He's miserable, his organs are all moved around and he's unable to move. In fact, by the time you find him, he's been stuck in that tree for decades. And the only friend he has among the Tree Minders is a young girl named Yu. So yeah, that's where Harold ends up. Quite a tragic end, I'd say, for a character who's been around since Fallout 1. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. I just want to say this is the end of the official lore on Harold, meaning that there is more story, but it's really up to you, to the player, to decide how his story ends. You can kill him, you can spare him, you can make it so that his, trees go further in the wasteland, you can limit his growth, so it's really up to you to decide how his story ends. But in terms of official lore, confirmed facts, the stuff in this video is pretty much covers all of it. So yeah, there are a few games which I didn't cover, like Fallout Brotherhood of Steel and Fallout Tactics, but these games aren't in the official lore according to Bethesda, who are the current lore detainers. So I didn't mention those. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you didn't, why not leave me a comment down below and tell me why not so I can improve. And otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.